Who has more mobility out of Jett and WAYLAY? That's what I'll be showing you in this video, as well as some other things like whether or not hindered impacts the spike, whether or not you can refract through a sage wall, and if the speed boost from her ultimate stacks. You'll definitely learn something new about WAYLAY just by watching this video, so make sure you stick around until the end so you don't miss any of these interactions and mechanics. All of these tests were done with Ditto School, so thanks to him for the help here. I'm traveling right now and this video simply wouldn't have been possible without him. To start things off, one of the first things we tested was the new hindered status effect, which massively slows your movement, but also gives you this anti-gravity like effect while jumping, even slowing down how long it takes your weapons to equip, reload, recoil reset time, basically everything you can imagine. Because this ability is so extensive, we tried to see if it impacts the spike at all, if diffusing or planting it becomes any slower, and no, all the normal durations are there for the spike, even if you are hindered. The same thing goes for all other, I guess you could call them normal abilities, so for example something like a Sage resurrecting or a chamber deploying his trip, as long as it's not a weapon, those sort of abilities behave just like normal. When it comes to the drones or abilities that can move though, these do actually get impacted pretty heavily by hindered, and this effect is particularly funny on Killjoy's turret, watching it shoot you so slowly and try to keep up with you, but there were a bunch of other ones here too, like Killjoy's alarm bot can't keep up with you, or your other drones, whether it be Sova, Sky, Raze, Gecko, all of those are going to get stuck in the glue. Basically, if it moves, it can be slowed. The hindered status effect is also especially noticeable on weapon abilities, so things like chamber ulting, Jett knives, even neon ultimate, these all feel slower than usual, so it's going to be harder to reactively use them after being hit by hindered. Then one really interesting interaction that Ditto's actually found was how hindered works with agents who want to be airborne. So the only ones that really come to mind here are Jett and Raze, but particularly with Jett, you can see here, if you get ulted or saturated by a WAYLAY, the hindered stacks with her floating passive and you will fall through the air super slowly. This will probably have potential use cases on those spots where you'd otherwise have only like a fraction of a second to shoot anyone, and otherwise it's sort of this high risk, high reward play where you're easier to hit, but you can still catch enemies off guard and give yourself more time in those crazy high angles. Like I mentioned, you can also get a similar benefit when satcheling with Raze, although it isn't quite as crazy seeing as she obviously does not have a floating passive, but still might be some combo potential there in order for you to stay airborne for longer and find the right shot with those ultimates. Alright, that's enough of the hindered effect for now. I think we got the gist of how that one works, so let's spend some time quickly looking at her light speed or dash ability, specifically compared to Jett and what sort of distance they both gain. If for whatever reason you choose to just use one dash on WAYLAY, you can see there that the distance covered is slightly less than that of one Jett dash. However, of course, normally when you use light speed, you would left click and get 2 dashes, so the overall potential distance covered is much higher. On top of that, you can actually go higher on WAYLAY too. If you look straight up when using the first dash, you actually go, again, pretty substantially higher than Jett does, and then you get to use the second dash afterwards, overall covering a lot more ground. Also, while talking about the dash, I figured it was worth showcasing. No, you cannot go through the Cypher trip using it, it'll hit you like normal. However, you can pretty simply just go over it assuming there is space, even just using one dash at the right angle. Next, let's go over the most interesting ability in her kit, being refract. Even though it is similar to some abilities like Yoru TP, Chamber TP, or even a Phoenix ult, they all have their own pros and cons. One key difference with WAYLAY is that her refract has this brief travel time in light form going back to her start point. Another key feature of WAYLAY's refract which is worth mentioning is that it's placed the same as a Phoenix ultimate in the sense that you don't hold it out and see where it's going to be placed. It is just going to immediately activate underneath you as soon as you press E. You can actually do this mid-air, so that means you can just jump over low ground and place your anchor underneath you. This could be a niche way to avoid fall damage, or I'm sure there are some other creative uses for this as well. One question I know a lot of people immediately had about this refracting back is whether or not you see things on the map, and the answer to that is no, you won't see enemies or abilities, you don't really gain any intel, you just see the map to have a sense of where you are. There is one funny interaction with the ascent doors, and the same thing happens with the teleporter on bind, where once you're stuck on the other side and can't go back, the refract actually makes you go the long way around, so you sort of just rapidly fly through the map as this little crystal of light. So yeah, you can see her traveling back, but she is just in this invulnerable form, so that means you can't shoot her. Even if she passes through a molly or something like that, even a Teo ultimate, she will not be damaged in that form. This makes this ability a decent counter to Raze ultimate in a way, because you can just activate the beacon as soon as you hear her pop ult, then easily react in time when the rocket is heading your way. When it came to dodging abilities, we tested a lot of the different interactions here, but to summarize, you can dodge basically anything with refract as long as you react fast enough. Whether it's a stun, detain, vice ult, they can all be dodged except for KO suppress. For whatever reason, that effect manages to hit you in the light form and you become suppressed when you exit, so that one might be a bug, not too sure there, but otherwise you can usually dodge things with Waylay's refract. To add on to that, it's important to clarify that this ability does not cleanse any status effects. So if you time going back poorly and get hit by the ability and then refract back, you will continue to be stunned, detained, whatever, so you have to time it right in order to avoid it entirely. There is one slight exception to that we found with Fade Seize, where as soon as you use refract, it does seem to completely sever the tether. We also tested all of the targeted abilities with refract, and this was a pretty inconsistent one, where Fade's Prowler and Razor's Broombot did not continue following you even if they're locked on. Meanwhile, Gecko's Wingman and Sky Seeker do continue to follow you, so some pretty interesting differences there. Some other interactions with agent abilities here include all the walls, so whether it's Deadlock, Siege or Vice, if your anchor is on the other side, you can phase straight through all of those walls no problem. The same thing is going to go for trips as well. When you're in that light form, you will not activate them. Finally, that brings us to her ultimate, which I'll briefly explain because I've seen a few people misunderstanding it. The big red area you see on your minimap, everything in that will be hit by the hindered status effect for 7 seconds after a short windup time. The second part of this ability is that you get the convergence effect, which is basically just a speed boost, so you move at the same speed as if you were Brimstims, and the neat part about this is that it doesn't matter where you are standing. You will always get this buff when the windup is done, regardless of whether you are near where you originally ulted from or not. The convergence effect is also similar to Reyna's ult, where your screen darkens a little bit and enemies become highlighted, which led to this really interesting interaction with Yoru and his clone, where you can actually tell which one is real due to him still being highlighted while the clone was left dull. Another thing worth mentioning with her ultimate is that it can hit your allies, so be careful, you definitely don't want to hinder them for that long, but you can freely walk into the zone yourself and not be hindered. This is different to her normal saturate ability, which does not discriminate and will also hinder you. One last thing I noticed with Waylay's ultimate is this weird little boost it gives you when you send out the effect. You'll see what I mean here when I just stand still and then sort of get propelled backwards as the after image of me appears. If you're trying to run forward after using your ultimate, this can feel a little clunky for a second as if you're getting stuck on something. I actually thought I was just lagging the first time this happened, so I thought it was worth mentioning. So those were a bunch of different interactions and testing with the new Valorant duelist Waylay. Massive thanks to Ditto School for helping me out in that custom lobby. Go check out his video too if you haven't already, or if you did, then thanks for watching both of these. Hopefully that didn't turn out too similar, but that's sort of hard to avoid since we are both in the same lobby using the same footage. And this was also just a little scuff doing this all on my laptop, but hopefully the quality difference isn't too noticeable. And yeah, that was Mythbusting with Waylay. Let me know if there's any other questions you guys have about her kit.